Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today, we're going to be looking at the question, is our next Pope going to be our last Pope?
That's right. We're going to look at some prophecies that say the next Pope after Francis will be the last Pope ever, including the prophecy of Saint Malachy, the prophecy of Saint Paul's outside the wall, and more.
Before we jump into this, I'm familiar with a few of these different prophecies, but I haven't really dived into them, but I'm hearing a lot online. So it'd be good to kind of peel back the onion on this thing and take a deeper look.
Yeah, whenever the Pope is sick or there's the election of a new Pope coming up, these things always come up because it's dealing with the unknown, and people all the way throughout all of history always want to tear apart the veil, look behind it, and try to figure out what's going to happen. And the election of a pope or the death of a pope is a very transitory time where people are wondering what's going to happen next. But there's one that people always bring up that I think will be the core of what we talk about today, and that's the prophecy of Saint Malachy, which is going to be a really interesting thing to get into. But before we do, I want to make sure that everyone watching this, click the like and subscribe button. It does a lot to help us get this show to reach more people. When we look at the analytics of people who watch our channel, less than 50% of the people who watch our channel regularly actually click the subscribe button. So if you're one of those, go ahead, click that button. It helps us out a lot. So Ryan, what do you know about prophecy in general? What's your thought on how people should deal with prophecy?
Yeah, that was a good conversation we had before this started. It's, the Jewish faith preceding, Christianity relied on prophets, right? Not just the prophets in the Old Testament, but also, like, I remember being in Jerusalem and celebrating Shabbat with a Jewish guy and going to the synagogue, and he had these pictures of these people up on his wall. So I asked him about it, and he mentioned that these were the prophets. So in this continuum of prophecy and prophets in the Jewish faith, they uphold the dignity of what they call prophets in their faith. Obviously the Catholic Church, I think, can separate that into prophets, in the Old Testament, and then also what we would consider to be prophetic attributes to what people have said in Christendom. So there's somewhat of a delineation there. I think this always falls into that category with Catholics. I don't think we've named a prophet and said this guy is a prophet in our Catholic Church. But we've certainly looked at different things like we're going to do today in line with, is this a prophetic revelation that's occurred with somebody in its nature and what's being said?
To that point, the office of prophet was a proper thing to the pre-New Covenant religion of the Hebrews. But with the baptism of Christ and his death and resurrection, all Christians are anointed priest, prophet, and king. So I think there's been kind of a difference there in that being an office versus that being an adoption into that. So, right. But the one I want to talk about now is what this episode's about is, will the next Pope be the last Pope ever? And there's a lot of people who will say that online based off of either a particular interpretation of certain prophecies or to get clicks, right? It's a very clickbaity thing. So let's talk about the one that I think is the most well-known, is the prophecy of Saint Malachy. So Saint Malachy was a bishop in the 12th century from Ireland. He was the Archbishop of Armagh, which is pretty much the Patriarch of Ireland. According to legend, he was summoned to Rome by the Pope to receive the palliums, which are the wool that the bishops get. So he went there, and then upon getting to Rome and seeing the seven hills, he fell down on his knees and had a vision where he saw all of the popes that would ever be the Pope of the Catholic Church, and then wrote them down into little one-line kind of cryptic descriptors. So there's 112 short phrases written in Latin that were said to describe who the popes would be. Now, this list ends with the last one called Petrus Romanus, or Peter the Roman. Now, if you look at it from that time, when they say that list started, there's been 112 popes. So depending on how you read it, whether you're looking at anti-popes or whatever, either Pope Francis is the last pope or the next pope will be the last pope, according to that interpretation of this prophecy. So let's talk about that, though, a little bit, Ryan, as to whether or not this is, well, let's do this. Let's talk about some of these prophecies and the ones that people say they got really right. So let's kind of talk about what some of these prophecies were, right? And I'll give some of these cryptic lines that he gave, and I'll do some recent ones so that we can kind of see it. So for John Paul II, the line was, and this was prediction number 110, De Labori Solis, or the labor of the sun. Now, people connect this because John Paul II was born during a eclipse, and his funeral happened during an eclipse. So they're saying the sun is laboring, and that's how it tied to that prediction. The Pope before him, John Paul I, which was number 109, his was De Mediate Lunae, which means of the half moon, which basically says, look, he was only Pope for 30 days. He made it like one moon cycle, right? Paul VI, Pope St. Paul VI, his was Flos Florum, right? Which is flower of flowers. And his papal insignia, his coat of arms, was the fleur de lis, the flower. Before that, you had John the 23rd, right? And his was Pastor et Natua. So a pastor and a sailor, or a shepherd and a sailor. And he was from Venice, which is the city of sailors, right? And on, right? You can see a lot of these different things. Like, for example, Religio Depopulata for Benedict XV, which was number 104, which means religion destroyed. And look, that happened, his pontificate was during World War I, the Russian Revolution, the rise of atheism throughout the world. So some of these seem really kind of on the nose, right? Which really kind of maybe gives some credence in people's minds to this, right? But like if you've ever read like Nostradamus, right, and he give these little same kind of cryptic things, and people can kind of read into them however they want, right? So let's look at how this actual document was supposedly found. So according to that legend, he had this vision around the year 1182 when visiting Rome. But the interesting thing is that it wasn't actually ever found until the 1590s, and it was found in the Vatican archives, right? So, I mean, there's no attestation toward it for 400 years, essentially. And St. Bernard of Clairvaux, who wrote the whole life of Saint Malachy and was his biographer, never mentioned it. So there's some things there that kind of speak to the reality of whether it was written when it was said was written.
Yeah, I mean, it's for somebody looking on. I think when you talk about Nostradamus and some of the way you can read into these things, I mean, some of these are pretty solid, right? Like you're talking about when somebody was born and when somebody died. Like, but again, I do think going back to the validity of a document, and the archives have millions and millions of documents, to just preserve them for the sake of preserving them a lot. Don't like bring them out and parade them around as the gospel truth. It does kind of make you wonder that this has been sitting on the shelf for so many years, and how it came to light, who brought it to light, what was, what did that picture look like, because like for me, I don't really walk around all day thinking, this is going to be our last pope because of this document and what's true about it. I just think it's kind of interesting to look at. And then I think a lot of reason why we're doing this is because people lean so heavily into materials like that. And then, I don't know, you could say send people astray, or just fill their minds with certain things that, really have no basis for, that that reality. And I always think about what Jesus said is like, you'll never know the time. You'll never know. Like these are the words that came out of his mouth. Right. So yeah, a little bit of potential quackery there. Would I say
A little bit. So I'm glad you said that, because I think you took a really common sense approach. Like, hey, this thing's been sitting on the shelf for 400 years. Why is it coming up now? And one of the theories is that, well, here's like the interesting thing, right? So when it was found in 1590, it absolutely, I mean, to the T, nails all the popes, supposedly for the last couple of years, right? So in the 1590s, right? So you would have things like ex castro Tiberis, right? From a castle on the Tiber, right? And this is the first one in the list, which is Celestine II, right? Which is when this initially supposedly happened. And he was born in Castello, which is on the Tiber, right? So it's right on the nose. Then you had the next one, Frigidus Abbas, right? Which is Benedict XII, 1334 to 1342. And he was from a monastery called Cold Spring, the Cold Abbot, right? Then you have one, Pius III, 1503. His line was De Parvo Homine, which means from a small man. And his family's name was Piccolomini, which means the small man. So a lot of this seems kind of like, okay, well, let's go back and look at the popes that we knew have been there, and let's kind of write a line that makes sense. Like if I was writing like one and you were the pope, I'd be like, you know, of the cross, right? And it's like, oh, it's of the cross, right? And then it'd be like, oh, it's Ryan Delacroix, right? He was the Pope of the Cross, right? So it would be something like that. That's so it's kind of like retroactively filled in. So one theory to kind of explain how this probably was, well, if anything, if this prophecy is false, here's what I've read as the best explanation as to why it was created. And I think it goes down to these, some tricky cardinals trying to support a particular cardinal to become the next pope by creating a list of popes and saying, oh, here's the prophecy. This guy's obviously meant to be next. And I'm going to read this. So, and Ryan, I mean, you can see that, right? It's like,
you
this
totally
guy's
see that.
absolutely destined. And this kind of thing happened throughout the whole ancient world, right? There was one Roman consul, and he said that when he was born, he saw 9 eagles, and you were only supposed to be a consul twice in your life or something like that. And well, he made it 8 times. And then his final time, they're like, we don't want you as consul. And he's like, yeah, but there's the prophecy. There was 9 eagles. I saw them. So, wait, dude, I thought you said it was 8 eagles. No, dude, it was 9 eagles. You got to elect me one more time. So people do these kinds of things to support candidacies, especially, in the ancient world or in the medieval world. So, one theory, I'm going to read this. One theory to explain the prophecy's creation put forward by the 17th century French priest Louis Morey. It said that it was spread by the supporters of Cardinal Simoncelli in support of his bid to become pope during the 1590 conclave to replace Pope Urban VII. In the prophecy, the pope following Urban VII is given the description ex antiquitate urbis, from the old city. And Simoncelli was from Orvieto in Latin, which is urbe vetanum, which means the old city. So they're like, well, this is the cardinal from Orvieto, and this next pope is from the old city. Guys, I think you've all seen what happened here today. Vote Simoncelli, right? And so that to me seems to make a lot of sense that, you have this whole list, all the popes before this kind of right on the nose, and then the pope who was coming up in the next conclave lined up with maybe this supporter here.
Perfect timing, finding this
right
document. Like, yeah, it's like kind of a spiritual manipulation, or another angle that they take. Even like Constantine, when he became emperor, he saw these signs in the sky. He was very vocal about those. So yeah, like I guess now kind of considering sort of historical figures and visions and different things, you can kind of see where that was kept, as an angle for diplomacy. Hey, we got this thing right here. Look at this.
Right.
But like we had on our last show, the Holy Spirit votes people in. So, you know, we learned a lot about that, with Father Smith.
Yeah. So, but like, is the next pope then? So then, if you follow this line, right, and there's a lot of doubt around this now because of that. But if you follow this line, then the next pope is, well, basically according to this, Francis was the last pope. He was Peter the Roman, which I don't think really lines up. And people can say, well, it should. There could be a gap in there. And then they start stretching the definition. They're like, well, from the glory of the olives, then to Peter Roman, there could be more. We just didn't put them in there, right? So there's always people trying to stretch a prophecy to fit what they're hoping to see or to continue to get into these mystical things. But I'm pretty skeptical about this prophecy.
Yeah, I am too. I don't think it kind of falls in line with what we believe too,
Yeah.
That popes
no
are
man
somehow
will know the day or the hour.
Right. It's somehow our popes are given to somebody in a prophecy. To me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense that God would operate that way for us to be the beneficiaries of that knowledge,
Yeah. And here's the thing. The Catholic Church doesn't say this is true. They don't support it. They've never said this is a real prophecy. You have to follow it. And I think you'll see that with how the church treats every private revelation is with arm's length. It's private revelation. The church never makes a definitive statement on things like that unless very specific instances, maybe like Fatima, and they'll say it's worthy of veneration, it's worthy of sainthood for the seers, right? But private revelation like this, the church stays away from because it's so easy to forge these things and so easy to get people who want to believe things like this,
Especially because he was a saint too. I think that kind of adds a little bit of perspective, validity to it. Like, we got this document. He's a saint, pile it on thick. Why don't you?
Right. Yeah. Like let's go find a saint that everyone loves. Oh, hey, we found this hidden document from, Saint so-and-so from 500 years ago. Whoa. I love that saint. That dude knew what he's talking about. We should listen to that. Well, I agree. Now it says I should be the next pope. I'm not saying everything, but I think we should follow this, right? So that's my personal theory on or I guess the best explanation of the prophecy of Saint Malachy, because it was never mentioned during his lifetime. It wasn't mentioned by his biographers. It's 500 years later. Sure, some of them line up, but I mean, if you throw 112 descriptions in a hat and pull one out, I can make it match up with anybody. I can find a way to connect it. And I think it's like the same way people will read their horoscope in the newspaper or on an app or whatever, and they'll say, oh, today you're going to have difficulties, but a friend will lend a helping hand. Well, it's like, I did have a hard day, and Jim really did say some nice things. Man, that was right on, right? Like, people can find meaning and they can make connections. And I think that's one of the things that make it's what makes humans so unique in the animal world, is that we can find connections. We can see fire and we can see it makes things hot. So we build fire so we know to cook. We can see, breaking this type of rock opens up and gives us this kind of ore. We can see connections, but also I think that ability can go crazy. And that's why we see Jesus on toast and a man on the moon, and we see figures and shadows. And that leads to superstition. And superstition is never good. The Catechism speaks against it very clearly because it's an affront on our trust in God.
I wonder how that was received in that conclave too. I can just sort of imagine, there's a
right.
champion.
You know what the funny thing is? Do you know what the funny thing is? That dude didn't even get elected. It didn't even work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I just kind of think about okay, so there's all these, cardinals getting together, and who's the guy that brings this out? Is it him? Is it like him? Or he's like, yeah.
Oh, no.
No, he had to run through some channels on it. Yeah.
I'm sure really? He did. You got some come in like, oh, mail call. Oh, hey, okay, Cardinal Sancelli. Hey, I found this,
where did this come from?
Prophecy in the Vatican archives. I've never seen such a thing. This is interesting, though. Wait, what's this?
Oh, God.
It says the next pope's going to be from Orvieto. I'm from the old city.
This can't be.
What? This can't be.
You got to push it. You got to push it away before you embrace it. you know?
No, no, of course. So, and I do think it's funny that the guy that purportedly that this was created for didn't even get elected. But then we still have people here believing it, almost 400 years plus later. So
Yeah.
that's that. So is the next pope going to be Petrus Romanus? And I'll read that exact one, right? So here's the final prophecy. So the last prophecy, the last pope predicted by Saint Malachy in his prophecy is number 112, and it's the prediction of Petrus Romanus. And it says, in the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will be a bishop, Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations. And then when these things are finished, the 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. It's pretty definitive, right?
Yeah. Again, going against scripture, going against Jesus' own words, where
no man
somebody
knows the day
has
or the
this,
hour.
right? Somebody has this Gnostic vision, like
Yeah,
they
but
know
people can say,
everything.
well, I don't know the day or the hour. I mean, popes can live varied lives. We're not saying what day or hour. We're saying during generally what time
This
frame,
time,
right? So
yeah,
this time, right? So, I mean, if every pope lived for, 100 years, it could be
yeah.
1,000 years in the future, whatever it is, right? Um, but yeah, I don't buy it. I
I
just, I don't
don't,
buy it.
I don't buy
Now,
it either.
you know what I
What
do
is this
buy?
one? What is this one? The um,
Go ahead.
Saint Paul by the wall, Saint Paul by the walls, or something.
St.
Like we're
Paul
gonna be
outside the
there in a few
walls.
weeks, and Orvieto
Right.
too
We're
as
going to be
well.
there. We are. We're going to go. We're going to be from the old city, Ryan. Maybe it's going to be of the cross from the old city, and you will be the next pope.
Yeah,
Who
you know
knows,
what?
man?
I'll draft something up. I'll put something
Right?
together, take it in there,
You're
and
going to
see
be
what
Pope.
happens.
Yeah, you're going to be Pope Paul the Sixth, the Second, dude, and you're going to get elected. And any baptized Catholic does not have to be a priest; can be elected pope. So you got a shot, man.
Do you put
I'd vote
like
for you.
the square root, little square root number on that? Paul the sixth, the second. Maybe I don't know.
See, I would spell out
Be
Paul the
cool.
Sixth in words, Sixth, and then second in
Boom.
Roman numerals. That's how I would do
Yeah,
it.
that keeps
Because
in
if you're
line.
Paul the Sixth squared, right, 6 squared
Yeah.
would be, so you'd be basically Paul the 36th, and that doesn't
Okay.
fly, right?
Yeah, we go with
So
math
yeah.
on that instead of Latin. Yeah.
Right? So dumb. But yeah, no. So this prophecy is the prophecy or the thing that people try to make the connection to the Basilica of St. Paul's outside the wall, which is one of the 4 major churches of Rome, which we'll be at here in a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's the burial site of of St. Paul the Apostle. It's where the early supporters after Paul's beheading buried him, and a church was built over. Constantine donated the basilica on top of it. The church has been there really for 2,000 years essentially, right?
Yeah.
Or there was first a little memorial, then a church after Constantine. So really, a church has been there for 1,700 years.
Yeah.
The church has been burnt down multiple times and rebuilt. And in the most recent rebuild, what they had done is they put these, and you can see around the top of the church, they put these paintings or these murals or frescoes, I'm sorry, of each pope in these little circles, right? Going all the way around the main part of the church. And I'll put a picture of it here now so everyone can see. But basically, and this happened, they show the picture and they show that they're all full, all these little spots. So whenever a pope dies, well, they go into the next open space and they put a painting or they put this fresco of them up there, right? And it's pretty cool what they do. They have a spotlight and they shine the spotlight on whoever the current pope is. So it's really cool, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing it. And then we can get the actual facts when we're there instead of relying on secondhand knowledge. But it shows, if you look at the pictures, they're out of spaces. So they built this church and there's no spaces left. There's one spot left next to Pope Francis. So they're like, okay. So this church, the site of where St. Paul was buried, that has put pictures of every pope for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, now only has one spot left. So that tells people, well, the next one is going to be the last one, because after that, there's no more spaces to put any popes in these things, right? So they take that as an architectural prophecy based on this church that the next pope will be the last one. That's what that prophecy is.
Yeah, and you wonder like what they would do if it's not a prophecy, where they would put that next pope. Do you just take one down, like put them in?
You just move them all, slide them all over.
Yeah, that's way more believable, I think, than the first one, the one of Saint Malachy, because it's got nobody's trying there. It's just the end of this, area where you can put up a pope. Yeah, it's just
now,
there.
I don't know if this
kind of cool.
Here's the thing, though. Now I'm going to connect these two. Now, if anyone wants to fact check me on this, they can. But according to what I read, and we're going to be there in a few weeks, so I'm going to check it out with my own eyes. But these popes start with Celestine II, which is, so they go back to Celestine II. That's the first pope in this series. That's also the first pope in the prophecy of Saint Malachy. So there's kind of a little bit of a connection. It's like, wait a second. All these popes, the first pope there. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, right? And I couldn't find anything definitive. But if it was, I think then things get a little bit curious, at least. I think I could see why people say, well, wait a second, dude. You have this prophecy of all the popes. It starts with Celestine II. Then you have this church, right? And it starts with Celestine II, and there's one pope left. Wait a second. Is this lining up? Did the church get built off of this? Or did maybe whoever wrote this document go and count all the spaces and say, look, there's how many popes there will be? So there's some things to consider there. And I don't know how accurate that is. Anyone can feel free to fact check me if they've been there.
And was the time of this church as it was built, does it line up the same structure, line up to when this document was being produced, or did it burn down and then it was built again, or, whatever?
It was built again.
A lot going on.
It was built again. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe it was that Cardinal built it.
Cardinal built it. He was doing everything, man. He was pulling out every trick in the campaign and it just wasn't working. He's like Hillary Clinton, dude. Like, we'll do anything to get elected, and just people aren't having it. But then when I was looking at it, they always show this picture online of you have John Paul II, then you have Benedict's picture, then you have Francis's picture, and then you have this one last open spot, right? That you can see the line. But what they don't show online in the end of the pictures is that if you just kind of go around the angle, well, there's spot for at least 6 more popes, right? So there's another the angle continues. So maybe, according to this church, there's going to be 6 more popes. And let's just say an average pope lasts anymore. And with technology, let's say 10 years, right? Let's just give that as an average. You're going to have some long popes and some short popes, 10 years. That gives us 120 years. And you and I will be long dead. And our children will probably be long dead unless technology builds it up. And, not my concern, I suppose. So that's another prophecy. But I just, a lot of these theories, I think, are also kind of pushed or supported or given fuel by anti-Catholics, by Protestant fundamentalist anti-Catholics, because in their particular pet prophecies, the Antichrist will be the last pope, right? So they're always like, oh no, the Pope's going to be the Antichrist. And they're going to start one world religion. That's their theory. And I don't know, man, the older I get, all these theories, I don't care. They're all theories. They're all people with overactive minds. To me, I don't know who the next pope's going to be, but I'm going to love Jesus during that. I'm going to try to be a good person. I'm going to love my family. I'm going to try to pray, try to help the poor, try to follow the commandments, try to read scripture. Whatever happens, that's beyond me, man. I'm going to.
The internet brings a lot of that out too. I mean,
well, it's engaging. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this video were watching it for the same sort of curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. There's tons of things out there about, all sorts of things in the Catholic Church that are just bizarre, where you're just like, wow, like there are so many people consuming information about the church is just completely false. You're just like, wow, man, it's kind of sad, but I'm sure
you even have people within the church you'll even have people within the church who will say, well, the third prophecy of Fatima, they said they released it, but did they really? That third prophecy, they didn't actually release what was really said. And, Benedict XVI said it was released. John Paul II confirmed that prophecy, was, in his interpretation about him getting the attempted assassination. That's why he took the bullet from himself and put it in the crown of Our Lady of Fatima. But then even in the church, you'll have people saying that, because everyone likes to speculate. Everyone likes to try to know things that they're not really meant to know. It makes you feel powerful. And that's the same thing that Adam and Eve did. They ate from the tree of life so that they could have knowledge of death and become like gods. And I think that's a natural human inclination, especially with our fallen sinful nature. But my advice to anybody who's worrying about any of these things is don't.
Yeah.
If it's true, you can't change it. And if it's not true, it's not going to change your life anyway. So just go and work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, and let God handle everything else, right?
Ultimately, yeah, it's not even if you knew it and it was manifested somehow, it's not going to work. It's not going to work out your own personal salvation. You get to heaven, you're like, I knew it, God. And he's like, yeah.
Oh, yeah, great. What about that puppy you kicked off that bridge? What about poor Baxter?
What about Anchorman?
Right? Jack Black. Right to HE double hockey sticks.
Dude, you just don't throw a burrito out of a car, okay? You just don't do that.
One time me and my friends shot a frozen burrito out of a 3-man slingshot and hit a kid like 4 doors down that were playing soccer, and that kid started crying. I felt really bad about it.
Yeah, because it probably hurt really bad.
Oh, it was a frozen burrito. One of those it was like a brick, yeah. Yeah, I got to confess that, because I'm going to go there and be like, look, I got the prophecy. They're like, yeah, remember that frozen burrito? No good.
You're no good.
I got 2 predictions though, Ryan. 2 predictions that I think do make a lot of sense. Number 1, if you go to CatholicTalkShow.com/Hallow, there you will find, and I predict this, the number 1 Catholic prayer app in the world, and you can get it for 90 days for free. Right now we're in the middle of Lent, and Hallow is doing so much. I mean, they're having millions and millions of people joining this app to pray. They've never had more people on it. People are joining. They're like the number 1 app in the App Store. And it's because this app is bringing people to something so fundamental to their life, which is prayer. And they've got so many resources. They've got the Pray 40 challenge during Lent with, Jonathan Rumi and Mike Schmitz and Father Mike Schmitz and
Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt's in there.
Chris Pratt and and Mark Wahlberg, Sister Miriam.
I'm doing the kids one with Maria. The kid that they have a kids one. She loves it, man. Like absolutely loves it. So yeah, they are just such a blessing for the church. I don't know if you saw this, but the Jesus statue in Rio de Janeiro, they actually lit it up with these beautiful images of Mary, the Blessed Virgin and Jesus. And I was like, man, this is cool. And they're like, Hallow did this. And I'm like, of course they did.
Hallow's praise boldly. I mean, they really do. And I think that app is, dude, my mother-in-law goes, we were talking about things to do for Lent. My mother-in-law goes, I found this app, Hallow. I'm going to do that for Lent. She was telling me and my wife, Kelly. And I'm like, I felt really offended. I'm like, that means you have not watched our show, because Hallow has been our sponsor for like 3 years. We talk about it literally every single episode. You've just betrayed that you do not watch your own son-in-law's podcast, which I don't blame her, but also,
was that a surprise?
A little bit. I know my mom tells me she watches. My mother-in-law doesn't, though. Okay. My mom probably tells me that, though.
That's what in-laws are for. That's what in-laws are for.
My mother-in-law is great. I love her. She's really actually awesome. But yeah, go to CatholicTalkShow.com/Hallow. You can get the app. Try it out for 90 days free. They'll take you all the way through Lent, through Easter. You have daily examines. You have rosary. You have daily gospels. You have the Pray 40 challenge. You have sleep music. You have sacred music. You have all sorts of different prayer resources that you can really elevate your prayer life with the number 1 prayer app in the world. Now, the second prediction, Ryan, and this one's a little bit more in doubt, but it's up to you people watching to make it happen, is to go to CatholicTalkShow.com/Patreon and become a supporter of the show. Because otherwise we can't continue to make the show without your support. We have so many great things that we can offer in our gratitude, like coffee cups, hoodies, rosaries, all sorts of things of little ways for us to say thank you. And, we're not asking for big donations, just small little donations that help us continue to make the show. Ryan, I bet you they would all support it if we created this document that said, by becoming this supporter, you might really be influencing the next conclave. But we won't go that shady. We'll just say we really rely on it and we appreciate it. Right? If you don't support us on Patreon, Ryan Delacroix is going to get struck by lightning. Okay?
I will tell you,
we do not want that.
I do have this weird curiosity about televangelists, and I watch some of them online just to laugh. So I do that.
Look, these televangelists, they're like, look, I got this Learjet. And it was such a good deal. I know God wanted me to have it because now I can get to anywhere and I can pray with people anywhere on a Learjet, and I can pray when I'm on this plane. You don't want me flying coach, do you? And look, it was such a good deal. It's $26 million. It was basically, I had to take it. Look, that is not us. We're asking for like $5, maybe, $5, and then we're going to give you something back. Like we're asking for pocket change. So if you can find it in your heart and in your budget to support the things that we do, we really are going to be getting into a new studio here soon. So we really do actually need to have your support to be able to continue the show, to grow it, and to take it into the future. So go to CatholicTalkShow.com/Patreon. And if you're still watching, click the like and subscribe button. Goes a long way to helping the algorithm get this out to more people so more people can listen to the things that we're sharing with y'all.
Yeah. So we really appreciate you guys joining us for this episode. As always, we're very grateful, and we'll see you guys next week. God bless.